Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, and my co-host Mikah Sargent. We talk about Amazon's home robot. It's not out yet. Probably will be at some point. The Vesta. Are you going to have one someday? We'll talk about that. Also, Verkada shows how God mode for surveillance cameras is probably a really bad idea. God mode almost always is. Amazon isn't bringing its books to libraries for digital distribution, and I don't like that very much. The new Instagram Lite app might actually become a big hit in India. Goodbye, TikTok. And Facebook's complicated priorities, engagement, and responsible moderation. All that and so much more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 174, recorded Thursday, March 11th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by the Enterprise Tech 30. The Enterprise Tech 30 is a definitive list of the 30 most promising B2B startups as determined by over 100 venture capitalists and 20 corporate development teams. Visit enterprisetech30.com to see 2021's winners.
And by Udacity. Build your tech skills through industry-leading programs created and recognized by top companies worldwide with a nano degree from Udacity in as little as 12 weeks. Visit udacity.com/twit and use coupon code TWIT at checkout to get 50% off through 5/30/21. That's May 30th, 2021. And by the way, this is incredible. Right now, they are having a flash sale for a limited time. Use code TWIT75. And folks, you're going to get 75% off through March 22nd, 2021. Wow. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other one, Jason Howell. Good to see you, Mikah. We got a great show today. We got three people who we've never had on before, and I love that because we're broadening out the guest lineup. I love it.
Yes. Speaking of new folks, first we'll start with a story about Amazon and a secret special project they're reportedly working on. We have Eugene Kim from Business Insider here to talk about his piece on Amazon's Vesta home robot. Welcome to the show, Eugene.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So let us kick things off kind of just if you could give our listeners a basic overview of what this project is, this Vesta project. And also maybe you share that little tidbit about why the project is called Vesta for folks who are not up on their mythology.
Yeah, so it's named after the Roman goddess of home and family, I think. But basically, the idea is this new device being developed by Amazon's Lab 126. It's their in-house personal devices unit. They created the Echo Kindle e-reader, and their next big project is. From what I hear, is this Vesta project. And basically, it's a new device, home roaming device. You can use it at home, tell it to carry something for you, or check the room temperature, air quality. It's powered by, so voice commands are used. And another idea I've heard is that there's multiple cameras and computer vision involved. So, you could ask it to find your keys or wallets in your home. So it's kind of this, home personal assistant. And the most common description I've heard is that it's basically a Fire tablet, Echo Show device mounted on wheels. So, you could imagine this, the device with a screen and mic and multiple cameras just roaming around your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned in the article a tweet, I think it was, that Jeff Bezos had shared a while back of a Fire tablet mounted to a Roomba or some other robotic vacuum. And that kind of was maybe a hint potentially at this project. I thought that was an interesting tidbit. But one of the things that you point out in your piece is that there are reportedly, there are more than 800 employees working on this. Is 800 Amazon employees working on a project, is that a notable amount, or is that kind of, name any project in Amazon and you've got 800 employees working on it?
Yeah, I think for a device that hasn't been released yet, having 800 people on the team, that's definitely big. It's a huge, sizable unit. For comparison, I mentioned the story, like Roku, for example, had a little over 800 employees in 2017, and that's when they had 500 million in revenue. Fitbit had a little over 1,000 employees in 2015, and that's when they had almost 2 billion in revenue. So, for a hardware unit, single hardware unit, that it's a very big team. And from what I hear, like since you mentioned Jeff Bezos, this is almost a Bezos passion project, right? He's directly involved. So there's a lot of kind of leadership support for this device. And, a lot of resources are being invested. And I think they started more than 4 years ago working on this almost secretive project. So, definitely there's high hopes for this to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that the company seems to have been working on this for a while, that was actually going to be my next question. And I'm glad you answered it there, because you do kind of wonder where this product fits into the space. I don't know if you saw, but there were recently, Amazon sort of launched a Kickstarter type project on its own site, where there was a thermal sticky note printer, a smart cuckoo clock, and a smart scale for foods. And so you could put like blueberries in it and say how much sugar is in this, in this many blueberries, and it would tell you. And those products were not actual products yet. And instead people had to basically pre-order them. And if enough pre-orders took place, then Amazon would commit to making it. And last I checked, it was just the thermal printer that was actually passed through. I haven't checked back in a while, but I guess my question for you is, why is, and I know this is, I guess, a little bit of a curveball, but if you could understand kind of the company choosing to work on this internally and secretly, given how, and you note this in the article, the company does kind of iterate in public with some of its other products and projects. I mean, the Fire Phone is one example of an absolute failure that they went ahead and did in public and released, and they've had some other products that didn't quite do so well, or they're still trying to make happen and didn't quite make fetch happen. Tell me about why you think the home robot is one that they're working on in secret and really trying to push through to the market.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all part of Amazon's plan to make and its voice technology as ubiquitous as possible, right? They want it to be used everywhere, and the home is kind of it makes the most sense to target first, because that's where people spend most of their time. And, Amazon has been trying a lot of different, this kind of scattershot approach to this idea of, making it more popular. They've tried that microwave with, or, a clock, or like a subwoofer and speakers. And until now, it feels like, we're still not sure how they're doing business-wise. Like, are they really successful? We can tell it's very popular, but, at least anecdotally, what we're hearing is that it's still mostly used for very basic functionalities, right? You want to play your music, read the news, or set the alarm. But in terms of creating a business and generating sales, there's still a huge question mark. And, Amazon has tried different attempts at, partnering with Uber or, other companies to make a more transactional, right? Like they will try to get people to order stuff through. And we're not sure how successful that has been. And with Vesta, it seems like they're trying to more diversify use case. So they're adding these computer vision technology. One idea I've heard is that positioning it as a home office device because there's a screen and a mic. It follows you around while you hold virtual meetings. So I think there's a lot of different ideas being added to this device. But at the same time, there's, like I mentioned in my story, kind of a growing discontent or kind of skeptical view about it. I think employees are wondering, really how much mainstream appeal will this device have when, one of the price points they're considering is, almost $1,000, which is, significantly narrows down the addressable market for them.
Absolutely. I think this is certainly something that we will all be keeping an eye on going forward. I have a lot of Echo devices in my home, and maybe one that drives around and tells me where my lost keys are would be something fun, but we'll have to see about that. Eugene, Kim, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And of course, folks can head over to Business Insider to check out this great piece on Amazon's Lab 126 and also the Vesta project in particular. But if folks want to follow you online, where do they go to do that?
Twitter, Eugene Kim 222, or LinkedIn are the best channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. We'll talk with you soon. It just makes me think of a future when we've got an Echo robot rolling around, and then we've got one of those indoor drone assistant things or cameras flying around. Oh, dear God. Anyways, coming up next, your stories of the week. We've got them a bit earlier in the show, but there's a reason for that. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, let's take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode of Tech News Weekly, and that is the Enterprise Tech 30. The Enterprise Tech 30 is a piece of just amazing research. It's developed by Wing Venture Capital in partnership with NASDAQ. The private enterprise tech, it's an opaque sector. You honestly have no idea which company is doing well or which one is doing poorly. It's not always easy to find that sort of stuff out. They're being cagey around growth, around revenue, all that stuff. Sales cycles can be long, arduous. There are many ranked lists that actually feature startups and tech disruptors out there, but these lists, they're often dominated by consumer brands or even more mature B2B startups on those lists as well. That, by the way, everybody kind of already knows. These lists create credibility and trust that a company featured will actually deliver a real tangible outcome. However, it's often not the case, as the many ways that these lists are produced, behind the scenes, lobbying, pay-to-play methods, all these things influencing the lists, they're subject to bias based on how much hype a company can actually generate. Well, the Enterprise Tech 30 brings to light the enterprise startups who have the most potential to tectonically shift how enterprises operate for the better. Awardees to the ET30 are actually on a fast track of growth and to change how business is done. They're expected to be future IPOs and multi-billion-dollar exits. It's not possible, actually, to lobby your way onto the ET30 like it is on those other lists I was talking about. In fact, you can only be selected and become a part of that elite community just by selection alone. The Enterprise Tech 30 focuses on companies with potential at all stages of maturity, rather than just, only showcasing companies with a very mature business and undeniable traction as it stands right now. The ET30 should be considered a buying guide for enterprise executives who are seeking to bring more validated and credible digital innovation into their organizations. Enterprise tech founders should see inclusion as the highest endorsement of their current and future success. Founders that aspire to build publicly traded companies should actually see inclusion as a watershed moment in their founder's journey. And tech executives and high-performance operators will use the list to help guide their decisions on what companies to join. So the 2021 edition of the Enterprise Tech 30, it's brought to you by Wing Venture Capital and NASDAQ. It just launched. So head over to Enterprise Tech 30, that's enterprisetech30.com, and you can see who made this year's list. That's enterprisetech30.com. We thank ET30, we thank Wing and NASDAQ for their support of Tech News Weekly and the TWiT network. It's good to have you all on board. So thank you very much for sponsoring this episode of Tech News Weekly. And now, Mikah Sargent, it is time for our Stories of the Week early edition.
Yes. My story today is about a security camera startup.
It's called Story.
I think it's called Verkada, pronounced Verkada. Yeah. I'm not sure. But anyway, this company has, multiple cameras particularly in some big places. So instead of it just being, your typical average consumer, these are global corporations, schools, police departments, and other places. And the company was breached on Monday when some hackers gained access to super admin accounts. Super admin accounts you can think of as like God mode. It gives you the ability to see live feeds and also archived videos of Verkada's customers. That gave them access to 150,000 cameras. And through that, we're able to see inside of Tesla. They were able to watch police interviews, archived police interviews, and they also witnessed hospital employees tackling a patient in one of these cameras.
Oh, wow.
So lots of different places that these cameras exist, including hospitals, which has, HIPAA concerns, in police interviews, which has its own concerns, legal concerns, inside of Tesla, a corporation, but also, individual consumers and customers. Apparently, this has been going on for a long time. The super admin account and people being able to gain access to it pretty easily. Some employees told Bloomberg that even sales staff and interns have at some point been able to use super admin accounts. The quote is, "We literally had 20-year-old," which, age, that's not the important part. If you're 60 and looking through a camera or 20 and looking through a camera, that's not yours. Right. Both of those are bad. But anyway, we literally had 20-year-old interns that had access to over 100,000 cameras and could view all of their feeds globally. Said one former senior level employee. Now, this is troubling, obviously, and the fact that, many of the employees internally could gain access to the super admin accounts. Verkada has said, hey, super admin accounts are a necessary thing so that if a customer needs help with something, then the person who's troubleshooting with them can gain access and do what needs to be done, which that's the case with a lot of different services. There are ways for the person debugging to be able to get more access, but typically that requires some sort of consent from the consumer or the person who purchased the camera or the company that purchased the camera. There are rules in place and actual technological limitations in place, like two-factor codes and things like that. Verkada says that it did have some of those things, So it's unclear how then interns and other folks gained access to these accounts, including the hackers. Now, the hackers said the reason why they wanted to do this was to show that it's super easy in some cases to expose users' confidential spaces whenever you have video surveillance. It's unclear kind of what all people were able to do, but one former employee, according to Bloomberg, said that customers were told that employees wouldn't have access, or that it was implied that employees wouldn't have access. But even though it was implied that employees wouldn't have access, engineers routinely looked at people's cameras every day. I think the most concerning thing for me, and it came in at the end of the article, was that there are several companies. One time I was checking out a security camera company that made a product that it had like a live person on the other end who could tune in and actually watch what was going on. So you put these weren't security cameras for inside your home, they were for outside your home. And in the event that someone who didn't belong and that maybe, appeared as if they were breaking in or something like that, a human being could notice that, who was watching on the other end, and be able to deal with that. But that security camera system had a privacy mode. And with privacy mode, it said, hey, I don't want anybody looking in, just use the motion tracking and all that kind of stuff and send me notifications. I'll pay attention to this. I don't want you paying attention to it, right? So with privacy mode on, which Verkada offers, it makes it so that the cameras are not able to be accessed by the employees at Verkada. However, super admin accounts let you turn off privacy mode on any account, and therefore the camera becomes viewable again to the employees. So privacy mode, schmivacy mode is the theme of that piece of the story. Troubling. This is just one company. There are many companies that make security cameras, and they all have different privacy things. And I think that ultimately this is just another reminder that you have to be aware of what you are potentially opening yourself up to when you choose to have security cameras, and where those security cameras come from. And if there was any time I would ever beg someone read the terms and conditions and the privacy policy of a service and a product, it would be for security cameras, so that you are more aware of what employees have access to and what they don't.
Yeah, indeed, especially when you're placing, like you said, these cameras on the inside of your home and not on the outside. At least on the outside, there's a little bit of a little bit less of a squirmy factor for me, right? On the inside, coupled with, and who was it in chat that pointed this out? Retcon in chat said security cameras and startup companies are two vectors that make the back of my neck tingle, which is so true, right? Like, okay, placing these security cameras in the home. Verkada launched, from what I can tell, back in 2017. So I don't know that they're necessarily a brand new startup, but a couple of years. I mean, there's just certain things to consider here, and I don't know at what point I would even feel comfortable bringing a security camera that's especially connected to the internet inside my home. I don't feel comfortable with that. Smart speakers are similar. They're capturing audio, but I don't know. In my mind, there's a difference between audio and streaming video from inside the house. It's just a different level of ick, I suppose. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with it. And also pointed out in the piece is just kind of the general hypocrisy, as it says, between bringing a surveillance network into your home under the guise of security, added security, and then realizing that in so doing, you have completely exposed yourself in an insecure way to a whole lot of other factors that weren't there prior to that. So a lot of considerations. And yeah, this story just kind of Just God mode rarely seems to be like a really great idea, because anytime we ever hear about God mode in these tech stories, it's usually someone taking advantage of it. I think the last time that the one example that comes to mind, was it Uber or Lyft? I think it was Uber. Back when all the stuff was hitting the fan for Uber, that was yet another story that Uber had a God mode and that there were people, back at headquarters just watching it willy-nilly. So if it's got a God mode, I don't know. It's maybe not such a good idea.
Yeah, God mode is a no. That's a no for me.
That's a no mode for me. No, thank you. My story is thanks to friend of the show, Jeffrey Fowler from the Washington Post. He wrote an excellent article, as he usually does. His work is fantastic. But he wrote an article about libraries and digital media, and it caught my attention because I'm a huge fan of the app Libby. And if you haven't heard of Libby, or what is it? It's what is their parent company? Overdrive. That's what it is. Libby is an app that taps into the same kind of system as Overdrive, which happens to be another app, that allows you to plug in your library credentials and then digitally check out through your library account audiobooks and ebooks for free, basically, because it's through the library. It's kind of the same as going into the library and doing it. Love it. I use it all the time, especially now that I have a Kindle. Like, I use it to check out books and everything. Jeffrey Fowler wrote about how Amazon, they're not just a seller of books. It's also a publisher since 2009. Brands like Audible, of course, also Lake Union, Thomas & Mercer. So they have all these brands, these publishing arms within Amazon publishing books. And apparently Amazon just doesn't do what other publishers do, which is to sell their ebooks and their audiobooks to public libraries. They do sell physical books and audiobook CDs to brick and mortar libraries, but they don't sell their digital versions of their books and libraries. And what this ultimately means, it's better for Amazon's bottom line. Obviously, it really seems like a move that ensures that people who want to find digitally these books that they're publishing kind of have to do it through Amazon or online purchase. But it also means that people who need access to this stuff, especially right now in the midst of a pandemic where libraries are closed down or they've had to change things so much that it's really hard to actually solidify and get hold of the stuff that they carry there. It means that people are prevented from accessing and reading and educating themselves on a whole swath of this digital media. And Amazon Publishing feels like the library lending model is unfair to its business. I'm sure Amazon is not alone in feeling that way. Thankfully, libraries were created so long ago, we're talking Benjamin Franklin era, that they exist, and thankfully they do, because people with little to no income would otherwise not be able to educate themselves, inform themselves, re-educate themselves. Say they're out of work and they want to find a new career. If you have access to a library, you have access to free knowledge, and so therefore, they have that. But Amazon ultimately right here is basically saying, yeah, we're okay with that stuff. We're not okay with this stuff because it totally interferes with our sales model. And it just kind of feels a little scummy. So that caught my attention.
No, I agree. That's kind of a troubling thing for me, because I do have a lot of audiobooks are kind of my main form of entertainment, and because of how easy it is to use Audible, and because my library started to be built there in the first place, it's troublesome to, not troublesome. It's difficult to use other ones because you don't have the content there. But having all of that be unavailable in a way that, those audiobooks are not for access to other people, it does bother me. And especially given that, Audible, on top of having its own Amazon books, has so many other publishers' books there as well. And so it would be nice if it was kind of a give and a take, I guess, more so than it is, which is not at all right now.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. It's a great article. Definitely check it out. Jeffrey Fowler does great work. So I was a big fan of the article as well. They mentioned it. Actually, they brought this up on This Week in Google, which was what kind of brought my attention to it. And just the idea that if libraries didn't already exist, they probably wouldn't exist because creating the library model now, it would be completely different. And it probably would, I mean, maybe it's a pessimistic view, but it probably would not be nearly as equitable as it is by design right now. So,
yeah.
That's that.
Oh. Those are the stories of the week, folks. Up next, a lighter version of Instagram. Could it replace TikTok? Maybe not in the United States, but elsewhere. More on that in just a second. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Udacity. There are a lot of tech jobs out there, but do you qualify enough to apply? That is the question. Well, don't waste your valuable time and money. Udacity is the world's fastest, most efficient way to master the skills tech companies want with nano degrees. A Udacity nano degree program is a unique online educational offering designed to bridge the gap between learning and your career goals. You can learn a suite of employable skills. Udacity partners with industry leaders and experts who understand the in-demand skills applicable to the job market. Once you enroll as a student in a specific course offering, you'll be prompted to view the online course, as well as complete a series of projects and support courses designed to help you develop job-relevant skills. Udacity helps you build a portfolio on GitHub and LinkedIn to show prospective employers. Learn to network, get noticed, and land the job you want. Build skills through industry-leading programs built and recognized by top companies worldwide, such as, and these are big ones, IBM, Microsoft, Google, and AWS, Amazon Web Services. People from all over the world are using Udacity now. They have incredible programs for you to choose from that fit the tech niche you're looking for. AI, cloud computing, data science, and autonomous systems, programming and development and product management and digital marketing. Those are tech-adjacent roles that Udacity courses prepare you for, and so many more. Improve your earning potential by doing this. You can get real employable skills through project-based active learning that covers cutting-edge technology. Projects are reviewed by qualified professionals, and you'll have real human help and personalized code reviews to get access to qualified mentors 24/7. Yeah. Any time of the day, any day of the week. Also, Udacity has free courses if you just want to check out those to figure out if this is the right place for you. They've got flexible payment options, and you can learn at your own pace and schedule. Udacity wants to help close the skills gap for the Black community as well. The Blacks in Technology Foundation is partnering with Udacity to provide 1,000 free scholarships to help increase educational and professional opportunities for the Black community. The first cohort of 2021 includes 150 scholarships and, by the way, applications open in March. It's March, so applications are open. Both organizations want to increase diversity in tech roles by creating a pipeline of qualified candidates in desirable fields such as programming for data science, product management, and cloud DevOps engineering. For a limited time, when you go to, this is wild, folks, just like, wow, you should definitely do this, because for a limited time, when you go to udacity.com/twit and use the code TWIT75, that's a special code, TWIT75, you're going to get 75% off, 3/4 off through March 22nd, 2021. Yeah. The 22nd of this month, you need to go there. After March 22nd, it'll go back to that original offer of 50% off when you use the coupon code TWIT, and the discount will be applied at checkout. That's udacity.com/twit. Do not sleep on this deal. Get there before March 22nd, and you'll get 75% off with the code TWIT75. Thanks so much to Udacity for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly, and for that incredible deal that everybody should go take advantage of. You want to learn a new skill, you want to be employable in the tech space, now's the time, folks. And with 75% off, my God, you should definitely check that out. Thank you again, Udacity, for sponsoring this week's episode. All righty. Back to the show, back to the stories. Up next is a really interesting story that I saw pop up a lighter version of Instagram. And we have, heard about Facebook experimenting with lighter versions of its platform and what exactly that means, what an app that is a light version means. And I'm excited to say that we're joined today by Meaghan Tobin of Rest of World to talk about this very story. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Mikah. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so happy to have you here. So let us begin by kind of talking about Instagram Lite and what exactly Instagram Lite is, and maybe who is the target for this app, especially because we've got a lot of listeners here in the United States, and maybe for them with their, 5Gs and their phones with, terabytes of storage, it's not so much for them. So who's this intended for?
Yeah, so Instagram Lite is basically a pared down version of Instagram. It's made for Android users with limited bandwidth and low memory phones. So people who are in markets where they're kind of paying, maybe they do a pay-as-you-go SIM card or something like that for their data plan. And Instagram Lite takes up only 2 megabytes of space. Compared to 30 for the full-size app. So it's quite a bit smaller. And Facebook frames this like Instagram Lite can help users with limited capacity still feel connected to conversations on social media, especially during the isolation of the pandemic. And India is one of their target markets. And India actually does have pretty cheap data rates, largely thanks to Reliance Jio, which Facebook itself actually invested in. But Facebook is really trying as hard as it can to reach people who may not really be online yet or may not be online all the time or are new to using social media. And this is, like you mentioned, far from their first effort to do so. There are more than 400 million WhatsApp users in India, and this launch is also a way to get these users even further integrated into Facebook's app ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think that that's one of the things that you touch on in a piece is that we've seen a light version. I think it was tested in Mexico in years past, and the one something that's different about this one versus the one that was tested in Mexico and maybe elsewhere where Instagram Lite is available has something to do with Reels. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there, like you mentioned, there was a version of this app actually in 2018, and it was pulled from app stores worldwide last year in May. And Facebook said, we're revamping it. And the biggest change seems to be really that they've incorporated Reels into the version that's offered in India. But Instagram Lite before, was really popular in Mexico and the Philippines and Kenya, Peru. And none of these places got Reels in their versions of Instagram Lite. It's completely targeted at India. So it's pretty clearly directed, at filling the space left by TikTok when it was banned in India last year. But there's a huge caveat, which is that people in India, although if they're using Instagram Lite, although they can view Reels, they can't actually upload any of their own content. So it's kind of like a bait and switch. Like Instagram Lite is a gateway to get more people hooked on using Reels. But if they want to do it themselves and contribute content, they still need the full-size version of the app.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And I guess then my question becomes, is that a typical method that social media companies or other app makers use to get folks to sort of clear up space or devote part of their download availability to get the full app? That's the interesting thing is, here I've got so much space on my phone that it's not a big deal for me to download some big app, and I've got multiple terabytes of cap on my bandwidth or whatever per month. So is the idea that you get the person to download it and get a little taste of it, and then they decide to devote a portion of their storage or what have you to actually downloading the full app? And is that a common practice with other app developers?
I think that is part of the idea. I mean, I definitely think both things can be true. Facebook does want to reach users that have, low data capacity and give them a short form video app. But the thing is, there are actually tons of short form video apps available in India that have come up since the TikTok ban. So this is not like their only option. And with those apps, they might be able to contribute their own content. And there's some kind of similar parallels to Free Basics, which is a program that Facebook offered, also targeted at markets where people are kind of paying a lot of their own income for data or are using low bandwidth phones, where, people were navigating through the product, navigating through the text-only version of Facebook that was available. If they wanted to access more content or access other sites, there would be this kind of little pop-up that was like, you're leaving this and now standard data rates are going to apply. And it's, that eats up your data pretty quickly. So I think it's a pretty common bargain that, people have faced in the past.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. So what do we know about the timeline for this rollout in terms of, I guess, do we think that this app will end up, Instagram Lite will end up being available in other places? Because I think it was at the beginning of the story, I'm forgetting now, but didn't you say that it disappeared? Yeah, Instagram Lite vanished from app stores worldwide, and then they were working on an updated version, and then the updated version was aimed at people in India. So is it that it's only available in India right now, or the version that has Reels is only available in India and Instagram Lite is available in other places without Reels?
Yeah, so it's a little bit confusing and also a little bit vague. So it was pulled, you got it right, it was fully pulled from all app stores worldwide last year in May. And then the company started to relaunch Instagram Lite in a couple of target markets late last year. So Instagram Lite has already been re-released in India, in Venezuela, and Morocco. And Facebook said on Wednesday, when it kind of had this press conference to unveil Instagram Lite worldwide, saying that it will be available in Google Play Store in over 170 countries over the next couple months. So that's a little bit vague. Yeah, but they're really, targeting, the undeniable focus is really clearly India.
Gotcha. My last question for you, and it's a pretty big one here, is about Facebook's push into India in general. You talk in your article about Free Basics. If you could explain to our users what Free Basics is, and then the larger concern that comes along with Free Basics, where Facebook is kind of serving as the gateway to the rest of the internet.
Totally. So Free Basics is something that Facebook came up with several years ago, and it's basically like a package. Also for people with really limited bandwidth or very basic phones. And it's a text-only mobile version of Facebook that's packaged along with other like zero or low data versions of news sites and a couple like health and job sites. So it's like a little app and you can see Facebook and all these other sites within it. But there's a couple tiers of what's available in there. And many people have criticized that not that much local information is actually available in it. And it's gotten pretty widespread use in some of its target markets. So by the end of last year, 32 countries in Africa had used Free Basics at one point. And Facebook claims that it helped 100 million people get online. But critics, especially in India, when Free Basics was being rolled out there, say that the company is effectively like acting as a gatekeeper to the broader internet, and it's privileging certain services and information over others with no transparency about why. And so in 2016, digital rights activists in India really successfully argued for Free Basics to be banned completely in India, along with some other zero-rated services. And they said that it violated net neutrality, which is the principle that, all internet traffic should be treated equally by service providers. For example, one of the things that they were doing inside Free Basics is offering this maternal health site by Johnson & Johnson. And the company said, that site helps them collect data that predicts consumer behavior. So critics say that it's also basically capitalized on the situation of users with limited capacity in order to collect data on them and promote Facebook products. And so this is, kind of the backstory of this sort of Lite version or like lower data version of a Facebook product in India, the market was extremely not receptive to it. So I think it's pretty interesting to see Facebook try and roll out Instagram Lite in this context, especially when there's also been so much appetite for homegrown alternatives to TikTok since the ban. It seems like they're really going to have an uphill battle to try and get the users that they're looking for.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining some of that, especially for our listeners. But also, I want to thank you for writing this piece and the entire rest of world folks for kind of focusing on, as the title would say, the rest of the world and the tech stuff that's going on there. Meaghan, Tobin, thank you for joining us today. Of course, folks can head to restofworld.org to check out your great work and other great pieces there. But if folks want to follow you online, where do they go to do that?
You can follow me on Twitter at megatobin1, or just read my work on all of my colleagues' work at restofworld.org.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Up next, Facebook's fixation on misinformation. Take it away, Jason.
All right. So I was very intrigued. I was online last night, just kind of searching around, looking for stories that caught my attention. And Karen Howell from the MIT Technology Review tweeted out something along the lines of, I've been working 9 months on this piece. It goes live tomorrow. I can't wait. Slightly nervous. And immediately I was like, all right, that sounds interesting. You work 9 months on a piece about Facebook. You're probably going to come up with some very, very juicy nuggets. And sure enough, Karen is with us today. Karen Howell writes for MIT Technology Review at technologyreview.com. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Absolutely. It's great to get you on. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today. So first of all, what exactly set you on this path? Your article really focuses heavily on the powers inside of Facebook as relates to artificial intelligence, as relates to our democracy, as relates to algorithmic programming, and kind of both the battles on both sides of that. I mean, these are topics and stories that we've been discussing in general, throughout the country and the world for the last 4 years at least, pretty heavily and significantly. So, what exactly set you down this path of exploration 9 months ago that kind of led you to reporting about Facebook's algorithms in the way that you did?
Yeah, so funnily enough, Facebook actually asked me to write a story about them. And the context for that is I cover artificial intelligence for MIT Technology Review. That is my beat, using journalism lingo. And I spend a lot of time specifically covering the intersection of AI and society, the impact that algorithms have on everything from, the way that it could discriminate against us, to the way that it's affecting democracy, to the way that it's surveilling us. All of those things kind of encompass my beat. And I had previously written about a different research lab called OpenAI. I'd profiled them. And afterwards, Facebook actually reached out to me and were like, we loved your profile of OpenAI. We want you to write something about us and our AI team. And Facebook is a very large company, so they actually set about scoping out the piece with me, which is kind of an interesting comms tactic, by setting me up with interviews with a bunch of different leaders within the AI org and kind of checking in with me after every one and being like, what is piquing your interest? And when I had my sit down with Joaquin, I had done a little bit of research on LinkedIn into what roles he had held at Facebook. And I just saw this entry in LinkedIn that said he had been the director of the Society and AI Lab at Facebook, after being the director of the Applied Machine Learning team, which is the team that is the reason why Facebook is an AI company. And I was like, that is so interesting. I want to focus on that. And so I ended up telling the comms person, this is what I want to work on. I just want to understand, like, what is the Society and AI Lab? Facebook has a Society and AI Lab. And yeah, that started me off on a 9-month journey.
Yeah, wow. And I can only imagine what it's like to work 9 months on a story like this and then to finally have it kind of, from what I can tell, be the featured piece for MIT Technology Review right now. So congratulations on that. So I suppose we should talk about what you've discovered in this time. You know, you had a conversation with Joaquin. Joaquin, is it Quiñonero?
Yeah.
Quiñonero, okay, the director of AI at Facebook. Obviously a super smart mind, a super smart guy. Good intentions, I would say, through reading the piece, but also kind of conflicted because Facebook's kind of machine in many ways goes counter to doing the right thing, whatever the right thing might be, because it wants to be a profitable business. And engagement is really that kind of metric that's the most important. We hear this all the time about Facebook. Engagement is the most important thing. Yet on the flip side of that, there's like the path, the destructive path that's left behind as a result of their pursuit of engagement. So I guess talk about the complicated mission that Facebook has when faced with these kind of polar opposite sides of the issue right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, Facebook is, in some sense, it's almost like any company in that its objective is to not necessarily. I mean, yes, it is to maximize profit, and it like ultimately it is beholden to its shareholders, which is different from some of the work that, you know, responsible AI strives to do, which is being beholden to the public and being beholden to society. And what was really hard in writing this piece was recognizing that Joaquin he's a great guy. He genuinely wants his team, Society and AI Lab, which eventually became the Responsible AI Lab, he wants that team to succeed, and he wants that team to do work that will help Facebook's algorithms not be so damaging in a variety of different ways. The problem is that a lot of that work then is directly in juxtaposition to the fact that Facebook needs to grow in order to keep its shareholders happy. And I should mention that it's in Facebook's case, what's really interesting is it's not necessarily even the shareholders that it's primarily beholden to, it's Zuckerberg's desire to grow Facebook as a company. And that is based on extensive reporting by many, many journalists that have sort of talked about how Zuckerberg has always had this obsession with like Roman emperors. And I don't even get into this in the piece, but he's always had this obsession with Augustus and with conquering. And it's infused in Facebook's culture, this desire to literally have every single person in the world use Facebook. And so that desire for growth is just when you develop your company incentive structures so that every single team is oriented around growth, and every single person on those teams, their compensation, their ability to get promoted is based on how well you effectively drive towards growth, then you will always sideline other work that is beholden to the goodness of society. And that is the fundamental tension that Joaquin has, is he's trying to champion this stuff, but it's just the entire system is oriented away from that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it really, the word that comes to mind for me is paradox. It seems paradoxically that Facebook is at arms with itself in so many different ways between the business and ethical side of things. Another paradox, of course, is their content moderation system, which really goes counter to their content recommendation algorithm. They're like constantly battling. And yeah, like I don't know what the solution is there. I suppose ultimately it is finding a value system that goes above and beyond what the shareholders actually require. And when it lands in the lap of Zuckerberg, as we know him to be through stories like this and everything, there's not a whole lot of optimism as far as that happening. Because if there were a scenario that was bad enough to wake a company up from that malaise and have them go, oh, wait a minute, maybe there should be a significant change to how we do business. I feel like we've seen that scenario a number of times, and we're still kind of in this same position.
Yes, that's such an important point, because when I was covering this, it took me a while to piece together the timeline. I had this timeline where I was mapping out all the events, and then I was like, wait a minute, all of these things happened after Cambridge Analytica. And it took me a while to realize that, and that's how I start my piece, is being like, this is where Facebook was. And then Facebook said that Cambridge Analytica was its awakening, that it suddenly realized that it needed to reform itself as a company. And I'm like, okay, that's our starting point. So how did it do? Let's score the company on all of the promises it made after Cambridge Analytica and see if it actually made progress on these issues. Unfortunately, it didn't change any of the incentive structures within the company. So all of the teams that are still oriented around maximizing growth, maximizing engagement, are still maximizing growth and engagement. And Facebook loves to say, we fine-tuned our news feed algorithms so that now instead of just interactions, it's meaningful social interactions. They talk a lot about meaningful social interactions. And I talked with former employees who were like, that is still engagement. Like, you can name it whatever you want, but it's still likes, comments, shares, and anything else that is trying to hook users into continually coming back to the platform and getting new users on board.
Yeah, indeed. Now, you also tweeted, along with the release of this piece, that your reporting kind of led you to this conclusion that there is that ultimately self-regulation is ineffective. It cannot work. Talk us through that a little bit. Why is that kind of where this path led for you?
Because I realized that the people that are supposed to be empowered at the company to do this, and who, through specifically Joaquin, he has been appointed by leadership to lead the responsible AI team. He has been given budget, he's been given headcount, and he himself feels a significant he feels beholden to doing this right. And he spent a lot of time, I talk in my piece about how he spent a lot of time educating himself, because he had spent so much time just being a technologist focused on technical things. And then he started educating himself about how technology actually affects society. He started reading about algorithmic bias. He started reading about how technology can impact civic discourse, democracy, all of these things. And he feels very strongly that he wants to make a difference on these things. And yet it still doesn't work, and it's not, and it's very unique in this particular situation, because oftentimes companies will appoint outsiders to hold these positions. They'll hire some external expert that they then bring into the company to champion this stuff. And it's really key that Joaquin was actually an insider. He already has all of the correct relationships at Facebook from his previous role as the director of applied machine learning to make this work. He already is friends with all these people. He has worked on them with other projects before. And even still, like literally all of the stars are aligned, and he still can't make this work because the rest of the machine is so oriented around growth. So if even he can't do it, then I really don't see any possible way that we can get to a point where self-regulation is effective. And they've been working on this problem for 3 years already. And essentially, the 3 years have amounted to absolutely nothing that actually tackles the crux of the problems that people have been hammering Facebook about that undermine our democracy.
Yeah, indeed. Excellent answer. follow completely on that in agreement. Now, hours after your piece was published, Facebook published a research paper on algorithmic fairness, which it's interesting of the timing, although, it's one of those things, this research paper has been in the works for who knows how long. So I doubt they just whipped this together in the 3 hours since the time but it's entirely possible that Facebook and probably likely that Facebook knew something like this was going to be released. So they had some time to ramp up. What's your take on what they published and why right now? The timing was just kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah. So there's a story behind the story. So this paper was actually part of what they wanted me to cover when I wrote my piece. My piece talks about how when I was covering the responsible AI team, I kept asking them to talk about these problems of misinformation, polarization, hate speech, all of the things that have become really, have always been important, but since the U.S. Capitol riots, I felt like now is the time to really dig into why Facebook is not addressing these issues. And they never wanted to talk to me about that. They specifically only wanted to talk to me about algorithmic bias and fairness. And they kept telling me, we have this great piece. They gave me a draft copy of that, a great paper. They gave me a draft copy of that paper. They gave me a lot of documentation, internal documentation that the responsible AI team had written all about algorithmic fairness. And they kept pressing me to write about that specifically. And so the deal that the comms person had at the time with me, not knowing what I was actually going to write about, was we will time the release of this paper with your article, because they assumed that is what I would be writing about. And so I told them specifically when I was going to release my piece. And I also gave them a no surprises email beforehand, which is, a journalistic thing you do when you're doing investigative reporting, where I listed out all of the claims that people who were not sources from Facebook had said, so that they had a chance to respond. And even after that no surprises email, they were like, we are still going to go forward with releasing this paper and releasing a blog post at the same time as your piece. And I was like, go for it. So that is why it is so perfectly timed at the same time.
Interesting stuff. You've put together an excellent piece. Obviously, it's catching a lot of attention right now. Top of tech meme, and seeing a lot of chatter on Twitter about this. So, congratulations for your hard work, because I can only imagine what it's like to spend that amount of time and to come up with something so well thought out as what you have right here. Karen Howe writes for MIT Technology Review. If people want to follow you and your work online, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. My handle is _Karen Howe. And if you would like, you can subscribe to MIT Technology Review. And I actually write a weekly newsletter about artificial intelligence called The Algorithm. That is a subscriber-only newsletter. So if you want my work delivered directly to your inbox, as well as all the other fantastic AI work that my colleagues do, then please support journalism.
That's it right there. Support journalism. Karen, thank you so much for doing such great work, and we hope to talk with you again on the show soon.
Thank you so much, Jason.
All right. Take care of yourself. All right. Fascinating stuff. We have reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly with a little bit of a different order than what you're probably used to, but I think it worked out all right, Mikah. We made it.
Yeah, it was great.
We record this show and publish it every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you can go to subscribe to the show, or if you're following the Apple camp, follow this show. You can do that over there. Audio and video formats at twit.tv/TNW. Also jump out to YouTube and click the subscribe button, and you won't miss a single episode.
Yes, and of course, you should follow us on social media. We are at TWiT on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at TwitTalk on TikTok, and I'm at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, so you can follow me there. You should also check out Smart Tech Today, which will be live later today, iOS Today, which will be live tomorrow, and does that cover everything? Man, do a lot of things. Also check out my review on hands-on tech of Wise's LiDAR robot vacuum. It is a super, super, super cool product that isn't going to cost you an arm and a leg like the other LiDAR options that are out there. What about you, Jason?
Wise is good for that. The super cool thing that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg like its competitors. So I'm curious to see how that goes for you. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Big thanks. Well, actually, I should just say All About Android is another show that I do on the TWiT network. And actually, this last week's episode on Tuesday, we had our guest, one of my favorite guests that we have on regularly, Juan Bagnell, on. We had a really cool discussion at the top of the show that's all about tech review, like the ethics behind tech review and what people, the kind of the things that happen from PR companies and stuff behind the scenes to try and see, how they can, get devices in people's hands and, the potential influence that might have and everything. It was a really cool discussion, kind of felt a little vulnerable at times to take what we do and kind of put it out on the table, so to speak, and talk about it in some ways critical way. So check it out, twit.tv/AAA, and see what we have to say about that and all the other Android news, of course. Big thanks to John Ashley at the studio for pushing the buttons and making this show happen live. Thanks to Burke, who's also there at the studio, setting things up, testing our guests, doing so much work behind the scenes. And thanks to you for watching, listening, chatting, basically supporting us. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
You know what's fun? Android. You know what's even more fun, though? All About Android. That's my show, Jason Howell, along with my co-hosts Ron Richards, Florence Ion, and we welcome guests on each and every week from throughout the Android ecosystem, developers, Googlers, journalists, people who are all geeked out about the Android operating system. We tell you everything you need to know. twit.tv/AAA every Tuesday. We'll see you there.